All right, morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Big crowd today, and a lot of people. The YouTube link just went out, so those individuals that are watching on YouTube should be joining us any minute. I'd like to start off with a suggestion that was given in regards to the Belmont three graduates that passed away over the weekend. Dale Manis had tweeted out about it. So just take a few moments here to keep that community in your prayers. Take a quick moment of silence for the Belmont community. All right. Again, welcome everyone. Lots of information to be processed today. So I'd like to thank Commissioner Knighting for joining us. And we got Mr. Armstrong as well, that was part of the committee that went through and gave us the document that we have. So I have already, thanks for all the questions that you guys sent to me. I have already shared those with Commissioner Knighting, and he'll kind of go through and process those. And then if there's any additional questions that we have after those questions, then we'll keep going. So Commissioner Knighting, go ahead, and I'm going to unmute you here. And welcome. Thank you for all you do for us as state ADs and for our student athletes. And we'll kind of give you the floor.
I appreciate it a lot, guys, and thanks for joining in today. I looked in there, and there's a lot of people here, and it kind of makes an old man feel like either they're looking for his demise or they want to support here a little bit. But I appreciate everybody jumping on board here today. I also noticed we had a few new ADs. Their name is iPhone for some reason, so I don't know who those are, so we'll have to figure out and see who those are once we get going here. But, you know, this has been a trying time for all of us. And you guys are boots on the ground. You're there with your communities, your kids, your coaches. I'm not. I certainly realize that. We have a lot of people looking for answers, and answers where there aren't none. If we'd set forth a plan back 2 months ago when this thing started, our plan would have been wrong. And I think today we're getting the information to be able to move forward with the understanding that we're making decisions with the best information that we have, and that everything is subject to change. We certainly don't know what the end of this story is going to be, but we're going to be flexible, nimble, as some say, and be prepared to adjust as needed. So I appreciate the opportunity to come on board here today. I can tell you up front, I'm not going to have all the answers, but if I run across something here that I don't have an answer to, we'll certainly reach out and get that answer and get it back to the group in a timely manner. I'd also like to thank Jennifer McCormick and the team that she led. They did a great job of taking a lot of information that was out there, the National Federation document and information from the Health Department and Family and Social Services Administration, the Governor's Office. And they're the ones that authored this document. They put this document together. And I think they did a great job with that, and I do appreciate that. We did have an opportunity to get to the table with Jennifer and Kelly and her team, and look at the Indiana High School Athletic Association and what our bylaws are and where they align with document C, and they listened, and there were some changes that were made along the way. And I think they were productive for the start, productive changes that got us to a point to where we can start the fall sports season. So we'll go through some of those as quick as we can. But again, I'm not going to have all the answers. And the first thing we're going to talk about a little bit is phase one. And I know there's been some questions sent to the staff and myself about the 15 hours per week in phase one. Phase one goes from July 6th to July 19th. And this July 6th date does replace the earlier date that was issued by the association of July 1st. So activities now begin on July 6th. The way we look at those is that's an acclimation period. Your kids some have been working, some haven't. It's a chance to get them back on campus. It's a chance to get them start stepping up with their conditioning and start working out. So it's 15 hours a week. So at a basic premise, no kid can be on campus more than 15 hours during those first 2 weeks. They can be, and we'll just use basketball as the example. They have 2 activity days during each week of those first 2 weeks, and they can be in an activity twice during that week and as much as 6 hours of time, 3 hours per session. And in addition to that, the student athlete can condition. Conditioning sessions need to be limited to 2 hours, and you can condition 4 days a week. We want to make sure we get the athletes some rest time in there. How you structure that within your own community is up to you. One of the questions we'll take right off the bat here was, should we allow athletes that are going to be going into their season priority during these first weeks? And I think that's a great way to do it. But the way we've outlined this is you may have a single sport only kid that's a winter athlete or a spring athlete, and you can bring those in. So how you want to structure those 15 hours and stay within those guidelines is completely up to you. Again, no athlete more than 15 hours, 2 activity sessions with the toys, so to speak, per week. And then you have a total of 4 days of conditioning that cannot exceed 2 hours per session. And kids can only go to 1 conditioning session per day. So your coaches may want to get together and figure that out. The other thing they need to do is get a plan in place before we get to the 6th. And I know you guys are working on that actively. So I think that'll allow us to, bring kids back, get them into some sort of conditioning. I think the other question that is out there is what is considered formal competition. That's mentioned in all 3 levels of the phases. Formal competition, if you look at phase 3, it talks about bringing back girls golf. So no formal competition. Girls golf comes back in phase 2. No formal competition other than girls golf. And I think this means with spectators as we traditionally know it. It's a football game on Friday night. It's those types of things what I would consider formal competition. Phase 2 does allow for the start of girls golf, which aligns with our current IHSA calendar. Phase 3, the way I talked to Commissioner Cox and the way we look at that, it's according to IHSA guidelines is listed in there. That's for us, that is traditional summer rules. Just like it would have been the day after Memorial Day. So you'll have basically a 2-week period there where we'll be under traditional summer rules. You could have a 5-on-5 competition if you chose to do that in a basketball contest. But there's a couple things in there. There's no spectators. It's essential personnel only in phase 1 and phase 2. So it's only the coaches that need to be there and the student athletes that need to be able to participate in those. Parents, grandparents, people who are just along for the ride, so to speak, would not be able to be there during phase 1 and phase 2. And again, it's only essential people during those first 2 phases. So beginning on July 20th, that's a traditional summer time for us. I also back up. Phase 1, there's no locker room access. Phase 2 and phase 3, we do have 50% capacity in locker rooms. And I've talked to several people. Their plan is to, while a football team needs all their lockers for their equipment, certainly, they're just going to phase in. Defensive backs go in first while linemen finish their drills. And defensive backs get out, then linemen can go in. Hygiene is encouraged throughout this whole thing. Hand washing, showers, before practice, after practice. You need to make sure, and I'm not going to get into the specifics of wearing masks and sanitation and all those things. You guys can manage those at your individual school level. The other thing that I'll speak to real quick here this morning is the pre-participation physical form. I think there was a lot of concern out there that we were not going to have the physicals this next year. And we worked with our medical advisory group and several entities when that decision was made. So it's posted on my IHSA now under the student athlete eligibility documents. There is a supplement to last year's physical form. And this is for student athletes who did not have a physical. So incoming freshmen who do not have a physical on your form would need a regular physical. Student athletes that are participating for the first time would need a regular physical. But anybody that you have a physical on file for from last year needs to complete the supplement to that. And again, that's the top document under student athlete eligibility. It asks some basic health questions. And the premise there is and I think the one example of this we do ask about concussion in that document. With concussion, if you can track the origin of the concussion, let's say they had if they had a concussion that you can track and they've been cleared by a doctor and it's been since their last physical and they answer yes to that question, they would not need a second clearance for that. But if they did answer yes and there's no origin of the concussion, maybe they had an auto accident, you're not aware that they've been cleared, you would need some kind of clearance before that student athlete then returns to play with that document. So that's the kind of the way that's designed. We also have the consent release information that's on the back of that document. That's been updated. The one thing it does include now is it used to speak specifically to injury. It now speaks to injury or illness also. So we speak to injury and illness in the consent document. So again, that needs to be completed by your student athletes, and that would be prior to the first day of practice when that would need to be on file. So that's something you're going to have to hustle on a little bit, but I don't anticipate it being a problem because it's certainly not required, a doctor's requirement here, a doctor's signature required. Your regular concussion forms, sudden cardiac arrest forms will still need to be completed as they are every other year. There's no hiatus on those. And I'm sure there are several other things. Let's talk a little bit about weight room. During the first phase, you can use weight room, but spotters should not be over the top of student athletes. So you need to instruct your weight coaches to make sure they're running safe exercises with free weights. So you run safe exercises with free weights. And then the next phase then allows for spotters to come back in. You need to make sure that you have sanitizing things. So one of the things that was mentioned, if you have worn or tattered covering on a weight bench, you would need to make sure that that's either taken out of service or taken out of service or by or replaced or repaired prior to using. Starting to get several questions in, and I'm sure there are many, so we'll start rolling through these and try to answer those as we can here. And I'll just take the list that I have here that Rob provided me first, and then we'll look at the chat and kind of go through those first. The question was, the IHSA originally suspended moratorium. Student athletes would have been allowed back in July 1st. Does that change? And this guidance document does change that, as we stated in the beginning. July 6th is the beginning now, so that's going to move that to after the July 4th weekend, and then we begin. So July 6th is the actual start date. Are there any restrictions for schools to run teen camps after July 20th other than what has been sent out? No, there are no additional restrictions other than what's been sent out on teen camps. I know several schools are still going to do youth camps or teen camps during the July 20th week prior to the start of practice, which is July 3rd for most sports. Suggestions to help guide us with concussion or concession sales. That one, it does mention prepackaged food, which eliminates fountain drinks, popcorn, and that's not us. I will reach out on that question and see if we can get further guidance from the health department or IDOE or governor's office. That's not concession stands, and how it's managed is not facilitated, or I don't think you guys want us in the business of how you run your concession stands. So we'll reach out and get the proper answer on that one for you. Is staff wearing face masks after phase 3 starts a requirement or recommendation? In other words, will penalties be assessed to coaches not wearing them during contests? No, these are guidelines. These are recommendations. If your local school system says that you want everybody to wear a mask, then they wear a mask. If you guys have an optional policy, then you have an optional policy. We're not mandating that you're wearing a mask, no different than you go into a grocery store, or you go into Menards, they mandate it. If you go into Lowe's, they do not. It's an option, but that'll be a local control decision. When looking at multi-sport athletes in phase 1, is it a better idea to have them stick with fall sport? I think that's your call. I don't think that's a bad idea. If you want to put prioritization in phase 1 and phase 1 on your fall sport athletes, I think that's fine. You certainly have time to get your winter sports and your spring sport kids up to speed. But again, that's your decision and how you want to manage that at your school. If we are hosting youth organizations on our facilities after July 6th, do we need to enforce them? Do we need to enforce the rules, or should they be on our facilities since we cannot have a contest until 8:15? Again, that's up to you guys. Many communities, the only baseball field in the community is located on the high school. And if you guys allow youth sports to use your facilities after July 6th, then by all means do that. That's simple. That's your call. No issue with us if you choose to do that. Jim Martin asked a question about the concussions and the physical update. I think we did answer that. If they had a concussion and you can trace the origin and they were cleared by a doctor, they would not be required a second release for that. I think we've answered formal competition. What are considered contact sports? The only real definition that I can go off of is what was listed in the Federation document. Contact sports would be lacrosse, football, and I think they also listed competitive cheer in the Federation document. Now, you could argue whether soccer or basketball or any of the rest of them are contact sports. But I think, the purpose is they actually go intentionally make contact. And I think that's why football would be listed as a contact sport. I'm going to jump over now to the chat boxes and see if we can go through these. Chris, a scrimmage, Chris Lancaster asks, is a scrimmage a formal competition? A scrimmage is not a formal competition. It's really not a practice either. It's its own entity. I believe it would be allowed in phase 2. Therefore, your football scrimmages would not be to be moved, but you would still be essential personnel only. So it would basically be closed for the teams and coaches only, and it would not have an expanded presence like a lot of them do now. Corey Schultz asked, can golf parents attend matches during phase 2? Yes, as long as social distancing is observed during golf matches.
Hey, Paul.
Yes.
Clarification on the football scrimmage. If we move to Saturday the 15th, we can have fans. Is that correct?
I don't believe so, because hold on a second here. Let me look at my dates real quick.
That's the start of phase 3. Are fans allowed in phase 3?
Phase 3 goes to August 15th. So phase 3 does not leave us until the next date. So, okay. Yeah, goes completely through that date.
Paul, Paul, on Saturday, August 15th, that would be, Saturday, August 15th is the date that some contest would begin. Like there's potentially you could have a volleyball tournament or a cross-country meet on Saturday, August 15th.
You're right. August 15th is formal competition date start. I misspoke on that a second ago, Ken.
Okay.
So you could move your scrimmage to that Saturday.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, John, for the clarification.
The document is actually confusing because it does actually say phase 2 goes through the 15th.
Yeah.
And then phase 3 starts the 15th. So that's the clarification we needed.
Yeah, I can tell you the 15th is the start of phase 3 because that was one of the discussion points that we had when we met with the Department of Education and the IIAAA. Our whole goal was to set us on a path to begin athletics, begin our participation season as we have known for every other year. And I think that's what this document accomplishes. So the 15th is the date. So, Mike, do club sports, soccer, volleyball, basketball? Mike, I guess, Mike Ford, if you're on, I'm not completely sure what you're asking there. If Mike's question is, if they're already training, club sports are already training and playing by 7-6, do we need to start over with conditioning only with us? I think you need to follow the guidelines that we've issued here. I know kids are out there in a for-profit model participating already, but I think you need to work with the guidelines that have been established here and adhere to those even during the first 2 weeks, even if your kids have been out participating. We've answered the football. Physical forms and the consent form is going to be like every other year. They have to be on file in the athletic office prior to the first day of practice. So those consent forms need to be completed and turned in prior to participation in practice. Paul Heidenreich asked if the parents do not know the last date of the IHSA pre-participation physical exam. We may have some of that. I don't have a great answer on that other than, you guys would have to pull each physical to see the date that was actually signed or completed. And I don't know if that's physical. I think parents just need to do the best they can. It's all about keeping their child safe. And they need to provide the best information that they have available to us to their knowledge. I don't know that we can do a whole lot more than that. Rob Seymour, our star of the room here, do incoming freshmen receive physical and IHSA form in the 8th grade require a new physical? They do not require a new physical. They can go on the supplement. So incoming freshmen that had a IHSA form physical done as an 8th grader can utilize that coming to this year also. Tom Lyon. COVID-19 impacted attendance. Coaches need to track it. I think you work with your school personnel on that, Tom. And if I think where that's really going to come into place is prior to the start of your fall season, or school, prior to the start of school. If you have a student athlete that doesn't show up or you exclude for some reason and you believe it's related to COVID-19, then you'll need to report that to whatever reporting procedure that you've set up in your school. So it would be your nurse or whoever, and that would be a local decision on how that reporting goes. So if you have a kid that came to practice with a fever or something, then your coaches would need to report that to the appropriate people within your own school structure there if you do have an exclusion. Mark Hofer asks, 2 types of scrimmages. I think we have summer rural scrimmages where 2 teams can get together and participate. I think that is certainly, that takes place, that starts on the 20th. And then we do have, according to IHSA bylaws, scrimmages that are permitted they would begin once we get into our fall sports practice season according to the bylaws. There's no change there. Heather asked about disinfecting equipment balls in between each touch or each session. I think, Heather, that is each session. The IDOE felt, and I agree with them, that the single-use ball was almost too restrictive for where we need to be, and especially where we're at in Indiana. We got to remember all these are guidelines. So I would say that your equipment that is multi-use, pads, balls, those types of things, they need to be disinfected between sessions, not necessarily each touch. John Regasius asked, in phase 1, are there any other sports besides football defined as a contact sport? And I think for our purposes, football is the only one that's defined as a contact sport. Larry Cochran, our insurance carrier will not cover outside groups using the facility like AAU groups having trouble finding coverage. Yeah, I think insurance is going to be an interesting one. And I think that's going to be based upon your local carrier, your person that, your local general liability policy and what it looks like for your district. So you guys need to make sure that you're having those discussions with your central office staff so you understand what your insurance looks like in the future. It's too broad for us to be able to answer in a form such as this because everyone is different. And it's almost impossible. And there will not be a lot of consistency between carriers, I can tell you that. Just from experience. I think I've gotten through most of those. I think I've gotten them all in the chat here. At least my chat will not. I don't see any more here. Any additional questions, guys? We'll kind of open it up here for discussion and things from the audience.
Hey, Paul, this is Andy Tebbett, Westfield.
Yeah, Andy.
On the pre-participation physicals or the supplement, whatever that the kid would have to turn in, it's according to the DOE, it looks like they have to be turned in phase 1 prior to participation. But I think you said they just need to be the normal fall date. So I guess just some clarification there.
Yeah, I think it's listed on there. I can speak to what our bylaws are. I think what I would do, guys, is push those out as quick as you can and get them back in. And you've got time to do that. But our bylaws require them prior to the first of practice. Okay, I'm sorry, I don't have a lot more clarity in that, Andy, but I can speak to what our bylaws do.
Hey, Paul, there's a question there. It says, is cross country okay to work out 4 days a week in phase 1?
Running is a conditioning activity. So yes, they could. Additional questions, folks?
Chad Derek from Muncie Burris. Could you please repeat where we find that supplement? I went to the IHSA website. Is it the first 2 pages of the physical form, or is it something else I'm missing?
No, it's underneath the student athletic eligibility document. And tell me if you can't see it. And it's called 2021 Health History Update Questionnaire and Consent and Released. It should be under student athletic. It should be right above the regular physical form, first document listed there.
When I click that, it says the resource you are looking for has been removed, had its name changed, or is temporarily unavailable.
Well, we'll check on that because I just did it on my end. It may be a permissions thing because I can open it up on my end. So I'll check that right as soon as we're done here.
Thank you.
There's also a link to that document contained in the IDOE guidance too. So it can be pulled out there.
Hey, Paul, Dave Preheim from Concord.
Hey, Dave.
I just want to clarify here. I thought John Regasius I don't know if you can see it in your chat, but I thought he summed up a question pretty well just to make sure we're all clear on football. So between July 20 and August 1, we could have football 7-on-7s, but no fans, correct?
Yes, that's the way I understand the guidelines.
Okay, and then a controlled football scrimmage on Friday, August 14 could go on, but no fans. But if we had it on Saturday, August 15, you could have fans, right?
That is correct.
Okay, all right. Just wanted to make sure we're all on
Yeah.
the same page. Thank you.
No, I appreciate that. That's a good thing to clarify.
Paul, this is Al Cooper.
Yeah.
Clarification on in phase one, the number of groupings, the optimal number. Is there a specific number that we should have our coaches group our athletes in?
We don't identify a specific number out. We know if you some football programs in the state, if we group those out in small groups like that, it would take 24 hours to get everybody through. So we don't define what that number is.
Hey, Al, you might think in terms of your weight room, if you're running those groups together and they're going out for activity and they're also running in the weight room together, what's your weight room size? If it's, if you're halving that weight room out, you might want to have a size of a group that's going to be half the size of your weight room and no more.
Would that then limit my volleyball participation in the gyms and even basketball in that instance?
Well, I don't know. Well, it might, but your basketball teams aren't going to be as big as your football team, obviously. But your gym also has a higher capacity than what your weight room probably does.
I understand exactly what you're saying. I appreciate that, Dan. That's perfect.
Hey, Paul. Jerry
Yes.
Kiesling from Northeastern.
Hey, Jerry.
Inform me on dummies, the use of dummies during phase one. Can an athlete hold a dummy while another athlete hits that dummy?
I don't believe we have a restriction on that. It just needs to make sure it's in good condition. It's sanitized post. Doesn't have any holes in it, those types of things. But I don't see there's a restriction on that.
Okay. Thank you.
Hey, Brian, I can barely hear you. Did anybody else catch that from Brian? Sorry, Brian, I'm getting a lot of static when you come on board.
Brian, yeah, your microphone's not working real well. So if you could just type your question in the chat, if you have not already done so, and then we can make.
I believe his question's already in the chat. Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, but any word if Marion County and possibly other counties may be delayed, as has been the case throughout reopening guidelines?
Not from our seat, Brian. I'm not saying there won't be something come out at some point, but as right now, there's no delay in any county in the state of Indiana that I'm aware of. Additional questions, guys?
Hey, Paul, there's one on there from William Ball. Bill Ball said, can you use officials? Are they essential during scrimmages in phase two?
I think they would be essential, especially if you have a scrimmage to where you're trying to teach the rules of the game. They would be essential personnel also.
Paul, Steve Schindler from Anderson.
Hey, Steve.
Hey, I know this is a little early, but if for some reason schools decide that they're going to stay virtual in the fall, will that affect eligibility at all?
Well, if a school goes completely virtual and it's a school's decision, we'll make sure that it will not affect eligibility. The one thing that has come up is what if a parent chooses to go virtual and not attend school? Will we waive our virtual education rule? And I think that's a tough one for us to waive, simply because we're choosing not to group with people during the school day, but yet we're going to group with people just for an athletic competition or practice after school. I think that's kind of as they say, you can't have your cake and eat it too. At least they say that here in the South. I'm sure they say it other places. Additional questions?
Paul, Drew Tower.
Yeah,
You talked
Drew.
about camps in phase 2. If our coaches want to have a smaller type camper clinic in phase 1, typically student athletes obviously help with those. Does that count against their 15 hours a week in phase 1?
No, we didn't speak to that, but we do speak. It's 15 hours on campus, so I think we need to adhere to that rule during phase 1.
Thank you.
Paul, one of the
Hey,
questions
Paul,
that's come,
asking for a friend that's on the YouTube link. Does the 2-page long history form and consent form now take the place of last year's original first page of the pre-participation physical?
The consent section of that would replace last year's. That is correct. If they sign that again, the first page is just a history page. That would only be done. That's an extended history page. That would only be done if you're doing a regular physical signed by a doctor. So this is just simply the supplement.
Hey, Paul, I got a question by text. Can a multi-sport athlete attend more than 2 activity days a week?
Yes, that's on the sport, not on the kids. So your football team could have 2, your basketball team could have 2, your baseball team could have 2, your girls basketball team could have 2, but a student athlete has to choose. Their time is still limited, so they can't get more than 15 in the week. So.
Hey, Paul, Leanne Latshaw, Mount Vernon. Quick question, and I'll apologize up front if it's redundant. We use final forms, and so our kids and parents are going in, and they are basically re-answering all of the same questions that are on the physical form and then telling us if they're going to use last year's or get a new one. Is that acceptable to have as a form, quote, on file, because they're doing the physical, everything electronically, answering all of the same questions, just not that specific form that you all have just uploaded?
Leanne, I would advise that you don't do it that way, simply because there's some specific questions on the new form based upon the environment we find ourselves in. It asks if the student athlete has had COVID-19 or not, yes or no. And it also adds the illness question in. I think those are 2 important factors moving forward.
Okay, thank you, Paul.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Paul, this is Brandon Ecker, other Mount Vernon.
Hey, good morning, Brandon.
Yeah. This is probably a question that is more for the general group, but let's fast forward and get into postseason events. Right now it says July 4th, the state guidelines are 500 plus people in a gathering. So there's really no limitations. Do you see us wanting us to limit crowds during the regular season, but also in postseason events?
Brandon, I think to be honest, I think we're not ready to answer that question yet. I think that one is still out there in the future, and I think the next couple months, if you guys look what's happened on the country right now, we've just come off Memorial Day weekend, and I think that crowd gathering is going to give us a lot of great data to make those kind of decisions. These protests with crowd gathering in close proximity is going to give us some more great data to make these decisions, and I think we're going to follow CDC, Health Department, those types of entities' guidance when it comes to spectator attendance and if there is a limit on it or not. I think that's the unknown for us this year. That's one of the big ones that's out there. How many people will return? We don't know the answer to that. So I think we just need to hold on, and as we get closer to that start date, I think then we'll release more information on that or continue to communicate around that specific.
Hey, Paul, this is Mickey Golembeski over at Providence.
Hi, Mickey.
Hi, I'm just a little bit confused on one item, and that's most volleyball teams and soccer teams, usually during the time of July, they go away, visit a couple of different schools, and they have tournaments, or they play some ball games or some matches. We are saying in phase 2 that football can have 7-on-7. But my understanding would be that volleyball and soccer could not play a ball game or a match unless it's called a scrimmage of some sort. Is that
I don't believe
correct?
that's correct, Mickey. I think they could, just like they have every other summer. It would be, if it looks like it has in the summer in the past, with the exception of spectators present, I believe they can do that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Paul, I got a couple questions coming through email. I'll kind of throw at you. Andy Elkins,
Sure.
got a question for clarification. So starting on July 6th, a student can have an activity day on Monday, conditioning on Tuesday, activity day on Wednesday, and conditioning day on Thursday. Is that correct? Or how do you envision those days with the sports specific?
No, you could have a conditioning day 4 days of the week. So 4 days in a row, you can condition. You could take Wednesday off if you wanted to, go Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. And you could go an activity day. If it's just a single sport, they're limited to 2 days. But if the student is a multi-sport athlete, they could go 4 days. You got to keep in mind, I could technically go 6 days, but once you run out of your 15 hours, then you run out of your 15 hours and they would be done and not eligible.
So it's the sports specific basketball team just cannot take their activity days cannot be consecutive.
That's correct.
But
Yeah, well, it just speaks to, no activity days consecutive. So they cannot be consecutive, but a basketball team, sport specific, could condition 4 days and 2 days activities, just not consistent or consecutive.
Okay. So I got a few more here. Let me look them up here. Heather McGowan had a question on the COVID screening. Does that need to be done daily or can it be done weekly?
I think it needs to be done daily. And I think that's something that you guys work with your school folks on exactly what that looks like.
And second question from Heather is, do the small groups from phase 1, do those carry over to phase 2?
No, it's not listed in phase 2.
Okay. Question on baseball. This summer, I know when we get to, I guess, are the seniors, the graduates, are they allowed to participate in events?
In most years, they have not been allowed. However, this particular year, they have been allowed to participate until the start of fall sports practice. And that would only be in that 2-week window once we can get back to some form of participation or competition.
Hey, Rob, just to clarify, I just looked up, it does say in phase 2 that workouts should be conducted in defined smaller groups of students with the same students always together. I don't, whether it's the same group or whether you have a smaller group. That's what it does speak to that there.
Okay. A question from the YouTube, Roger Probst, would a summer advanced PE class count towards the 15 hours of being on campus?
No, education is always kept separate from the extracurricular side of this.
Okay. If a neighboring state stays virtual, can students transfer to the IHSA school with full eligibility?
It's still going to follow our guidelines, our bylaws, just like they have in the past. So as I tell parents all the time, until I see it all on paper, it's an impossible question to answer. So there's not going to be a waiver automatically for that type of situation.
I know we're just shooting things at you here.
No, that's fine.
Are the hour limitations only for phase 1?
That's correct. Only phase 1.
Yep. multi-sport athletes. So if let's say you have a soccer player and a basketball player, can their 3-hour sessions be on the same day, or should we be organizing our facilities so that those do not fall on the same, so things aren't on the same day?
We don't speak to that. I think it's almost impossible to do in some cases. So, you guys, we're not mandating that they're on different days.
Okay. Jerry Galma, do you see any other questions that we might have missed?
The only one, unless I missed it, did we define what small group, working in small groups? I know the NFHS had limitations, but I don't know if the new documents gave a number.
No, there's not a definition number. And to be honest, the meeting that I was in, there was not a number. Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I do not remember a number being defined as small group.
No, they talk about 50% of room sizes is what they were talking about. So
right.
Whatever that, and everybody's going to be different. Every school will be different in that setting. So
it's really going to be based on your facility, number of people you have available, those types of things. So that number is going to be a little bit different for everybody.
Other than that, Rob, I think we've hit everything on the chat on Zoom.
Guys, and one thing that, again, what I would ask you to do is if you guys have questions for consistency purposes, just shoot those to me via email. Most of you guys have my cell phone. You guys can always call me. If you guys have a question, I need to know the answer to that question anyway. So please just communicate it back to me and we'll get you an answer out as quick as we can. But we're starting to see the light. We're going to get there. I'll tell people it's positive that we have a plan in place here that allows schools to open, number one, and number two, allows us to return to some normal activity, given the facts that we know them today.
Hey, Paul, this is Kevin Day.
Hey, Kevin. Well, your name's iPhone here.
That's right. I changed it just last week, getting too many phone calls. So not getting around, but a way to navigate with the first phase. If we go outside with our conditioning, we don't have to, we can get more people there, correct?
I think that's exactly right. I mean, you can spread kids out across the football field and they've got some room. I think you can do those types of things. If you've got a group with we got 5 football coaches and you've got a group with each kid, you've grouped them, and I think you've got the ability to do some of that outside.
Thank you very much.
Rob, did you see, they did say, Ed Niehaus said that Greg Martz with Final Forms, they're working to get the new form on Final Forms. So anybody's a Final Form user would be able to, that would be available to their parents, that the new form from the IHSA.
Excellent. Thank you.
Additional questions, folks? Yes.
One thing we'll do is after this meeting, the chat session always gets saved. And so I copied the chat session out of the YouTube. So I can put those into a document and share that with you in case there's any that we missed.
That'll be great. That'll be great. And Rob, if you guys are I'm more than willing to, like next week, I know you guys, there's going to be questions that come up between now and next week. If you guys are good with it, I'd be happy to jump on here at the beginning next week again and see what else comes up and see if we can provide further clarification. Guys, I want to serve you guys. I want to help you guys. I want to help you get through this. And, I think together we can get through it. We'll be just fine.
Excellent. We greatly appreciate your service towards us and our student athletes and our communities. So we definitely appreciate you and your leadership. That is for sure.
Yeah, we'll all be just fine. I'm convinced. Jim Brown said we would be. All right, guys, I'm going to check out. I've got to go see a doctor about a bad knee. So we'll talk to you all later.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you. All right. Well, again, as Paul kind of, mentioned there, if you have any questions, reach out to him. Feel free to keep reaching out to Jerry and Ryan or me, and we can process those as well. And if we definitely, maybe send back as the week goes on, if we feel that we want to have Mr. Knighty back on again next week or maybe the following week, whatever, feel free to share your thoughts with me on that as well. And so as we, reach out to him, we had 200 plus on the YouTube and then obviously 100 on here. So we're still getting great attendance, and we appreciate your commitment to checking in with us on a weekly basis. And I think that's it. Mr. Armstrong, do you have anything for the good of the order that you'd like to speak on?
I don't. I just encourage, again, everybody to get with your administration above you and your school board and share what this plan is. And I know you're going to need to work with your director of operations and whatever with the first two parts of this plan too. There's some other aspects with staff as well coming in Appendix A and B. So just get with them and make sure they're on the same page with you. But this is pretty well lined out for us. I think if we follow it, and I know what our insurance company told us last week, if we follow the guidelines as they come out as closely as we can, then they would not find fault with the staff. But your insurance company is going to be different. But ours said follow the plan, and they're likely going to support us with this. So we'll be fine. I think we'll be fine.
If you guys don't, I have a couple of questions. When it comes to the screening process, I'm looking through this and it says self-screening. There's the school-based screening. We're taking temperatures and so forth, but it's not stated that you have to take temperatures. Is this something that several of you are going to be doing, or are you going to have the self-screening process? And then there's also the question about, providing professional development to your coaches and staff about this and information to your parents. Where do you guys stand on this? What do you guys feel?
Just answering from my standpoint, I'm going to have my coaches, I'm going to get with my coaches on what we discussed today and then have them disseminate that in their parent meetings for the fall, especially right away. All my guys that do fall conditioning or summer conditioning and all that kind of thing have meetings. So I'm going to have them disseminate that information in their parent meetings.
Unless my administration tells me different today, they were fine with what we talked about last week and using the final forms like the COVID screening and basically just asking kids to self-report what their temperature was. I don't think we're going to plan on taking everybody's temperature every time they come in, at least not until we get that equipment in. So I'm not sure where that leaves us other than that's where we are. We're just going to do some self-reporting.
I met with representatives of our local hospital last week, and he actually advised against doing temperature checks routinely. He said that should really be used as a supplementary thing after they have other symptoms. So simply because a high temperature could be because a kid has a sunburn. It could be because a kid has a UTI. It could be a lot of different things. And you got to make sure you take it in a controlled environment. I know some conversation was had about people doing it out at their football stadium, but if you're taking a temperature on a 90-degree day outside, you're going to register everybody high. He says the hospital, they're not doing temperature checks at all unless they show other symptoms. So the hospital is going to help us with our guidelines as well. So we're working on hoping getting those done this week.
We're not going to do that at Washington either because I don't think it's wise for my coaches to have that liability on their hands if they're taking a temperature and they say it wasn't a kid with fever, and then all of a sudden the kid goes home and his fever spikes and the coach is going to get blamed. So they're going to have to self-report, and we're going to have coaches, pay attention, like during a workout or a practice to see if they think, they can tell a kid might be feeling sluggish or ill, and then we'll probably just send them right home.
So along with that, I know Final Forms has the ability to do the COVID screening with temperatures and stuff. Are some of you not even going to do the screening through Final Forms? They're just going to do attendance and that's it. And if the kid has it, they're going to self-report. Or if you feel like a kid may have some issues, then you'll deal with it then. I just want to get an overall feeling of how you guys feel about that, or what you guys.
We are going to use the Final Forms report every day. The guidelines that we saw said that we need to be able to track it. And if it's requested, we have to be able to show that we tracked it and took attendance. And with Final Forms, I can download a spreadsheet just like that. So that covers our backsides.
Yeah, we're just going to take attendance every day. Kids come in, attendance, and we're going to use the IHSA pre-form that was put out the other day, and that's how we're just going to track it that way.
Thank you.
Any additional questions or thoughts from anyone?
Not any additional questions, just a statement. I'm currently in a meeting follow-up with the, make sure I'm not projecting there, with the DOE panel. Dr. McCormick's currently having her follow-up from Friday's announcement. She has her webinar tomorrow unpacking what she presented on Friday. I would advise everybody to check that out, just to, in the event that, like most of us, we've kind of focused on pages 18 through 25, just our portion of it, but just to see how the other pieces kind of fit together as it relates to the reopening of schools and transportation. Very interesting. Just one of the many things that's included in there that maybe we didn't quite engage in today. That's been talked about in this discussion I've been listening to while we've had our meeting is, in the event that we have a confirmed case. I know Brandon and I talked about this on Friday. We discussed how we would handle that because you have some conflicts there as far as what the CDC tells you. They talk about a 2 to 5 day shutdown potentially if you have a confirmed case. So in our, if we drew a parallel to that, what if that happened during the school year or during our seasons? I think we use example if a band member got a confirmed case, does that mean the whole school shut down for 2 to 5 days? Or, in our case with an athlete would have a confirmed case, does that shut the whole school down? How would your local school district handle that? I mean, that's something to talk about within, our plans. And I was kind of interested of how would the IHSA look at that? In other words, if we played Center Grove on a Friday night and it was reported on Monday that either one of their kids or one of our kids tested positive over the weekend, how would the IHSA look at that? Would they, outside of what they specify in that document as far as contacting our local health departments, would they require that the schools, not participate in any competitions for the next 14 days? Would everyone in contact that participated in that game, would we be required not to participate in any competitions for the next 14 days or so? So that's kind of what they're talking about. That's some of the questions that they're asking right now from a school standpoint. It'd be interesting to know where the IHSA stands on that as far as a competition standpoint, as we move into phase 3 and beyond. So just something to think about. But those are just some of the questions that are being asked right now from a school standpoint. Some for us to think about athletic-wise as we jump into July. What does that mean in July if we have a confirmed case? Does that just shut down our entire July and everything that we planned out for? But just something to think about.
All right. Again, thanks to everyone for your input, your questions, for Mr. Neidig and the topic we've been covering today. Yeah, if you have any questions or comments you want to process throughout this week that come up, feel free to send those to us, and we will create that long list of questions and to get to Mr. Neidig in advance again. Or if there's anyone else that we feel that might be a good possible guest in the future, we'll share that as well. Again, thank you for your time and commitment. And it's 11 o'clock now, so.
Hey, Rob.
Yes.
Mike Thornburg, say one question real quick. I know the last several weeks, everybody's talking about not doing anything in July with other schools. And then today, and we're all talking in phase 2, we could have scrimmages and so on. And what's everybody's gut feeling? Are your school going to allow that, or are we going to hold off to phase 3?
This is Phil Levine from Lebanon. I can speak to one point. What's going to drive me is transportation. So if they do allow, if we do decide to allow stuff, people are going to have to come to me, because I've kind of been told that there'll be no transportation until August 15th, phase 3, provided for my athletic program. So that's going to drive me. I don't know if you guys are in the same boat.
Mount Vernon will probably be focusing 100% internal. We will not do any external competition at this point or any external camps.
Same way with Northwestern, and transportation is a big part of that, Phil. We will not be doing anything. We're going to focus on getting our kids in shape.
Same at Northridge.
What are the what's the consensus on youth camps? What is everyone feeling, that they're going to go ahead and let their teams do them? They're going to advise against them?
We are not at Washington, Rob. We're not going to do youth camps. I mean, we're going to focus on getting now I am going to allow the 7th and 8th grade, because we are a junior high school. I am going to allow them to do the conditioning part of what we're putting together and start their process, but we're not going to do anything lower than that.
Gordon Central is looking more towards the fall break time frame to do our youth camps, because our coaches receive a stipend, particularly for the running of summer youth camps, and our school board has said that is okay to delay that. So we're going to look at the fall break time period.
The Southern Mount Vernon would do either maybe the last week of July, and probably stick with that multi-sport camp that we had talked about doing earlier, just kind of a give back to our community and babysit their kids all day for a few days. But I like Gordon's fall idea also.
All right. Well, we'll go ahead.
Rob,
yes.
Rob, this is Ray James. I do have a question for everybody, since we're on the junior high piece. We're a K-12 school down here, Perry Central, and I've had questions from my coaches about their lower level programs and what they can do. And what are other schools planning on having, like, 5th, 6th grade, 7th, 8th grade competitions in the fall? Are you planning on bringing your teams back when school starts and allowing practices and having junior high football and junior high cross country and stuff? What are other schools looking at?
Ray, we are at Washington. I mean, we're going to plan on it until somebody tells us we have to shut down, but we're not going to have higher level sports and not lower level, because we'll catch too much grief from parents. We're going to let the big kids play while we're not going to let the little kids play. That's what I'll hear.
Yeah, Ray, we're pretty similar to you guys at North Knox as far as size. Our junior high, we only allow 7th and 8th graders to play football, but they can play soccer. The 6th graders can play soccer. So, and that's because we have a youth group on our football youth group. They go up to 6th grade. So, you know, we're going to also obviously allow the 7th and 8th graders to play football, you know, volleyball, that kind of thing. So, and then let the youth group take care of themselves.
Muncie Burris, we're a K-12 school as well, small 3A, almost 2A school. We're going to have elementary sports, so 4th and 5th, middle school 6th, 7th, 8th. We're planning on doing that unless told otherwise, similar to Larry.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions?
Is there anybody word on large cross-country meets being canceled? I know we've had one, but that was just because it was on a college campus very early in the year. But I know IWU hosts 2 or 3. Anybody heard anything like that at all?
Is Ben Bachman still on here?
Hey, Dan, I'm still here. That's something, I mean, that's going to be a local decision. I mean, obviously we may get forced another direction, you know, statewide, but right now we are planning in my talks with our administration on having our big cross country meet on September 19th. Obviously that's always subject to change, but as of right now, we are moving forward with it.
Guys, this is Dave Harms. Do we have, has anything been said about wrestling, like a wrestling camp? I mean, that's total contact, but nobody's ever brought anything up about that. Is that not okay in phase 2, since that would be allowed in normal summer activities?
I think the contact rules go away in phase 2. I think that's just for phase 1.
Correct.
Dave, I'll share my coaches at Gordon Central actually came to me with a pretty good idea. We ended up buying, I believe, 3 grappling dummies that are typically used for MMA and jiu-jitsu type activities. Our coaches are going to use those in July. Teach kid throws and maneuvers and stuff like that without actually having physical contact with each other. They were about, the ones I found were 120 pounds each and weighed about, or cost about $250 a piece, but they think that'll be something they'll incorporate throughout the year anyways. So we felt like that was a pretty good purchase. They are kind of hard to find because I think people are starting to buy them up. So if that's something you're interested in, I would start perusing Amazon quickly.
Thanks, John.
Dave, USA Wrestling, I know they did put some guidelines out for phases. The phases, again, we may have to figure out how they pair up with every other phase or stage we're operating in, but USA Wrestling did put some stuff out that could help define what it looks like getting back, you know, to return into that sport. Still sitting at 75 strong in here. Anybody else have any other questions? on the YouTube side, see if we know this. Basketball phase 1, can they do drills that would require contact, blocking out, 1v1, 3v3? We said no spotters in the weight room.
I believe that answer would be no contact in that first phase. It's like soccer. I mean, they can only kick balls back and forth, but I don't think we can have them running up and down the field in different scenarios in that first phase because there would be contact. That's my interpretation, Rob.
Larry, I would agree with that. I'm thinking no defense. You do ball handling, passing, shooting drills. And that'd be the extent of soccer and basketball.
Going back to what Paul said, remember he talked about the first 2 weeks, which is phase 1, really just being that acclimatization period. So I think that supports what you guys.
Although it does say, it's on page 20 of the guidelines, it says, and that's why I asked Paul about what's defined as a contact sport. It says, for contact sports, no contact is allowed. And so I don't know that doesn't mean that you couldn't play some 3-on-3 or even 5-on-5 basketball where there may be contact between the athletes in a sport that's not a contact, that's not defined as a contact sport.
I just know how I'm interpreting it, John, and I'm not allowing it. My interpretation is no contact is no contact. I'm not taking those chances between July 6th and July 19th when these kids have not been in any formal training situation, even though some of them may be training. I'm just not taking that chance. So that's just my interpretation.
John, I think when you specifically asked him, I think he said football, correct?
Yes.
He didn't even mention wrestling. He just said football.
Correct.
And if you remember back when the governor began talking about allowing the rec sports and the travel programs to begin to come back, he mentioned 2 sports as contact sports, football and lacrosse, and that was all that was mentioned.
Yeah, Paul did bring up lacrosse, and he actually mentioned cheerleading. I think wrestling may have just slipped his mind on it. I think wrestling would be included in there also.
Yeah, and I think therein lies the challenge moving forward, that when you have 92 counties, and I think you have some guidelines, which we all discuss with some loose guardrails, and our coaches want, from a competitive standpoint, they just want that consistency so bad because that's what they give us a hard time about, right? Well, this school's doing this school's doing that. Ultimately, those interpretations will be left up to us. It's going to be left up to our local school districts and superintendents as far as, what 50% capacity is going to be and, what certain interpretation is going to look like. That's the unfortunate thing about this, because I think it would be a lot easier if they said that individual gatherings equal 10, 15. I know that'd make our life a whole lot easier.
As you guys have thought about how Paul said, you got everybody gets 2 days in this first week, the 3 hours. Are you guys giving thought to, like, say, your natural sports that kind of that share athletes, putting them on different days? How are you organizing? Or are you just letting your coaches decide what days they want to go, convenient with their family time? How are you dictating those 2 days per sport?
Rob, I'm letting my fall sports pick first, and then we're going to move from there. So, if football chooses Monday, Wednesday, they'll get their time, and then we'll see what that looks like for basketball and potentially any kind of baseball, I guess, is how we share our athletes. And girls will be the same way. Volleyball is going to have their option. Boys tennis will have their option, and then we'll look at what winter and spring looks like, because you're really only talking about a 4-week time period before school starts.
We'll probably do the same. We'll let coaches work it out, but we're probably really going to limit what our winter and spring kids can do. We want them to come to the overall conditioning and that sort of thing. I understand the 15 hours, but that can add up pretty quickly. And if kids have been sedentary and all of a sudden they're slammed into 15 hours, we're going to get kids hurt. So we're going to work that out as a group.
Yeah, this is Warren Cook from Richmond. Just wondering what everybody's thought is. It seemed a little bit fuzzy that the waiver forms or physicals in these guidelines saying that they need to be turned in for, they call it participation. Paul kept saying things about practice. So I'm just curious as to if people are going to try to collect those things before July the 6th or wait till the official first practice day.
Warren, we're going to put ours on our website, have our parents fill them out. They need to hand them to those coaches as they show up on July 6th. So until I have them in hand, we're not going to allow the workout. We have to protect ourselves liability-wise, and we think that's one way to do it. I also have a form from our insurance carrier that they're requiring to be filled out as well. So I've got 2 forms. We're going to get those downloaded on our website. I haven't yet, but they're going to have to, once I get the message again, I haven't messaged parents yet. I've been waiting for this document Friday and then our conversation today. And I'm also going to have a coaches meeting outside with my coaches to continue to practice social distancing. We're going to have that meeting later this week. And we're going to put together with my coaches' input what our so-called final document goes, even though there won't be a final document because it's could be ever changing. But I am going to require those forms to be handed in prior to workout.
We're going to do the same, but I have a question. Suzanne Crump and I have been emailing back and forth. So I know Greg is working on updating the Final Forms website. If they put that on Final Forms, we could just print those forms off from there. Can we not? Does that count? Is that legal or is that a no-no?
I would think it'd be okay, Leanne, but I don't use Final Forms, so I'm not astute to, using that form or policy, but I think you'd be okay.
Okay. I just know it's going to be difficult for a lot of people in our community if we don't mail those out. They're not going to be able to download them and print them. So then I got to mail them. I don't know where they all go. And then I got to get all their papers back. And that's a challenge for us. I'm sure it is for many of you, but that is definitely a challenge for us here.
If you're going to do Final Forms, can they not do it electronically?
Yeah, that's what we're saying. They are going to do it electronically. But part of the guidance and part of what I thought Paul said is he wanted us to have a hard copy. So I'm just going to have them do it Final Forms, and then if we need to, we'll print it off and we'll keep the hard copy in our office. Wow. That's good. Wow. I like it.
For those of you guys that don't use Final Forms, EventLink is adding that same form to their registration part. They're going to add a COVID tracking and attendance tracking too, if you're going to do that at your practices. Plus, they're going to have that same form that the IHSA added. So those of you guys that don't have the Final Forms, it'll be available for you since you've already got your EventLink account. Now, I'm not sure if you have to have the full school EventLink account or if it's just going to be on the basic athletic. That I'm not unsure of.
That's good to hear, Jamie. Do you know when that might be available?
Brandon said that they're going to have it available by July 6th.
Okay, thank you.
And on that, you've got to have the full school set up for EventLink. We've looked into it here at Clay Community, and it won't just be for the athletic side. It's got to be the full school version.
Someone had a question in the chat about the webinar for Dr. McCormick. Those are on Tuesdays at 10 a.m. So her webinar is tomorrow at 10 a.m. As you start to unpack this and have conversations with people in your community, in your school, again, if you have a good plan that you'd like to share, going back to that Google shared folder that Ryan Walden has created, if you can't drop it in there, then send it to Ryan or you can send it to me, and we will put that in there. Again, just as plans become available, it's good to look at what other people are doing that are in our state. I'm sure there's a lot of people that from out of state that you kind of come across through different social media things, but when we can compare apples to apples for the state of Indiana the best as possible, that is helpful. So we'll go ahead and start landing this plane. If anybody has any other questions, again, questions for next week, send them to us. We'll reach out to Commissioner Neidig again. And so if there was things that you still had some confusion on after today, or as you're unpacking it this week, we'll get back together again next week and talk more about it. So thank you everyone for your time and your commitment, and we'll go ahead and sign off.